Welcome to the Why Did I Get Cancer podcast. I'm Deborah Herlax-Enos, a small-town girl turned TV nutritionist and healthy living expert. I design health programs for the average guy or gal, including those average guys named Metallica. On September 1st, 2020, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I asked every oncologist the same question, why did I get cancer? But none of my doctors had good answers for me. I wanted answers, and that's why I started this podcast. I want to help you to lower your cancer risk and provide self-care tips for those in the battle. I'm getting answers, and I want to share them with you. I love today's podcast. Okay, now listen, I'm also fully aware that I probably say that every week, but I just talk to the most interesting people. So today's podcast was with QVC host Kerstin Lindquist. She's been in front of the camera for a really long time. She used to be a news anchor, and now she moved over to QVC, and she is a fascinating personality and a fascinating person. And we talked a lot about stress. Her mom had a lot of health effects due to stress, due to worry. And in fact, Kerstin shared with me that when her mom started experiencing mental decline, she was with her mom in the doctor's office, and the doctor brought in a brain scan, and there were all these black spots on the scan. And the doctor said, these spots are most likely due to worry. So Kerstin really took that to heart. And she was already a worrier. So she had to learn to be a warrior instead of a worrier. And that's no easy task. And it takes a lot of faith. I learned a lot from Kerstin about stress. And even though there are times I feel like I'm really nailing my stress levels, there are times it feels like it's my first day at stress camp and I have no idea what I'm doing. One of my big takeaways was turning the light down on my phone. She uses grayscale a lot. And she was saying it doesn't impact the phone's functionality or anything like that, but it just makes it less attractive. When the phone is less attractive, you are less addicted to it. There's not as much of a dopamine hit, which basically means you're more engaged in your daily life and the people around you, which can really help to lower your stress levels. So give today's podcast a listen. Like I said, I know I say I loved it. I say that with all my podcasts, but this one, I tell you, I've been in this health field for 30 plus years and I had a lot of great takeaways. So give it a listen. Okay, so everybody fasten your seatbelts. You know I like talking about stress. And today I have a friend, Kerstin Lindquist, and we've known each other a little bit through some family connections for probably 5 or 6 years, maybe.
At least, yeah.
But we've never really sat down and had a conversation about much. And today, diving into the deep end about stress. So welcome to Why Did I Get Cancer?
I am so pleased to be here. It's interesting. I knew you first because I prayed for you. That is literally how we met, was through a family member saying, will you pray for my friend? And that's how you kind of came across my radar. So what a beautiful way for us to meet.
What a beautiful way for us to meet. And you prayed I had such great prayer support during cancer. And here I am, cancer-free, doing this amazing podcast that I really feel God reserved for me. And this is my mission field now. So I love it. And I'm so glad you're here. And we're going to talk about stress. And I know that you have a lot of experience with this, specifically with a family member. And
absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about when did you first become aware that stress could impact your health?
Absolutely. It started when I was actually a new mom, which talk about being a stressful time of your life. And I want to preface it all by saying there are good forms of stress. So yes, my platform is reducing stress and finding space for rest, but there is some good stress out there. So people who might be listening and thinking, there's no way I'm getting rid of all my stress. That's never what my intention is, because there's some good parts of it. But how I got into this type of research and how science meets biblical truth around reducing stress is at my mother's age of 59. She was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. We were at a doctor's office in University of California, Irvine, where she had had some cognitive testing done. And a doctor walked into the room with basically results that he had found. And he put up an image of her brain and said, do you see those dark black spots right there? Many of those are likely attributed to stress. And I had infant baby girls at the time. Part of my story is of infertility and adoption. And I had two babies 5 months apart. And I remember looking at them and thinking, I can't let this happen to them. My mom had already missed me becoming a mom. She would never really be a grandmother in any meaningful sense of the way. And I didn't want to take away the most important person in their life during the most important time of theirs, which is what I was going through. So at that point, I was ABC News on my way to QVC. I did go back to school for health and nutrition and became a certified health coach and really dove into, I thought I would fix it by the way people ate, which is truly a very important part of all of this, as you know. But what I found was the overarching problem is stress. And that is impacted by how you eat, how you move, how you sleep, and so much more. And if I could help people with managing what is creating those dark spots in their brain, then I could save people from going through what I was going through. My mom did die 12 years later. She battled dementia for 12 years and passed away.
What an impact that made on you. And she was young.
She was so young.
I mean, I'm just going to say that's really young because that's my age. I'm 59. And I don't want dark spots in my brain. And I don't want dark spots anywhere in my body. But I have to tell you, after almost 3 years of researching and doing this podcast, over and over again, I have experts at the top of their game in their field who just keep saying, manage stress, manage stress. If you can manage stress, that is the secret sauce, because we are constantly manufacturing cancer cells. We are. We have cells all the time that are going rogue. Maybe they're not cancer. Maybe it's, your prediabetes or, inflammation with psoriasis and all these different things that, can go wrong in our body. But when we are managing stress, that means our immune system is working stronger, because stress just takes it out. It just puts your immune system on the back burner. And we need that immune system to keep doing surveillance. And so what a blessing that you learned about that at a young age.
Yeah. And I did learn that stress is negatively impacting everything from hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes, depression, your immune system, allergies. The list goes on and on and on. My mother did have cancer 3 times in her life, which, as you know, is a stressor in and of itself.
Yes. I had a really interesting podcast with Dr. Lee Erin Keneally, Center for New Medicine. She's an author, and she's probably one of the top people I send anybody to who's been diagnosed with cancer. And we had such an incredible conversation around stress and how she said it takes about 10 years for a tumor to be palpable. So let's just say you have a lump in your breast. So she said, okay, now look at what happened in your life 10 years ago, and you do the math. And that's what maybe started your body on this spiral of having cells going rogue.
We have so much more research now that is coming out of COVID. And they're saying 7 out of 10 people are stressed out, which I think we were probably close to that even before COVID, but it took something like that for us to actually start to get the research.
Agree. Yeah.
And that's one, and I'm sure you've talked to others about this as well. That's one of the big concerns now, is that stress, and people who haven't been able to get themselves out of that fear that part of our lives produced is now producing more cancer.
Yeah. The cancer rates right now, pediatric, which just destroys me to think about kids younger and younger getting diagnosed. And, but then now, the newest research is saying 1 out of 2 of us with cancer or some other chronic disease, and we're headed that way. So you had this epiphany in the doctor's office with your mom. It started you on this path of figuring out stress in your own life because you had 2 toddlers, and then you added a third.
Yeah.
So where did you start?
Well, I really did think that it would all be around how we eat and getting a handle on that. And I will say that's a huge part of it. And I have found that how you eat really does impact your stress levels as well. That's one of the things that I speak on all the time. I started by going back to school to get a certification and a higher degree in health coaching and nutrition. And I did it mainly for myself and for my family. I also was a host at QVC at the time, and I had always had a platform of health and wellness. That was also always kind of being, back then it was more like being in shape and being fit and being sporty was kind of my thing. And it took a turn for, oh no, this is a life and death situation. This isn't, I just look good in spandex.
Yeah.
So I did it for that reason as well, so I could be more knowledgeable for my viewers. And I really did feel, though, over the years, I went through a long period of being a secondary caretaker to my mother, as well as raising babies and then bringing another baby into my life. So there wasn't a whole lot of focus that I could put on anything except for mom and babies. She passed, and I had this renewed sense of something needs to be done about this. I felt a calling, had always felt a calling to be a missionary. And so my family and I left on about a half of a year sabbatical to go be missionaries. And that's when I really started, and that was at a health clinic, a Christian health clinic in Mexico. And that's when I really started to hear the calling of the Lord wanting me to pursue this more, this was his purpose. The pain that I had been through, not only from the loss of my mom, but infertility and adoption, which also has that health component to it. I needed to be able to serve women primarily, but everybody in that space more than I was doing. And that's when I kind of jumped in with both feet to writing books and health coaching and bringing me to where I am now.
So in your journey, and I know you've got a lot of great health research that you can share with us too, but I'm just wondering, are there people who are just born to handle stress better than others?
Just like we all have our inherent, am I a night owl or am I a morning person? There is levels of that. I would always say my mom was a self-professed stress case. She was constantly worried, and worry and stress we hold very, very similarly.
Oh, yes.
But just like we are meant to in the sleep side of things, for the most part, going to sleep with the sun and waking up with the sun, it has taken us decades in our lives to kind of program ourselves to have higher levels of stress and be able to deal with it, just like it's taken us decades in our lives to be the person who wants to go to bed at midnight as opposed to 8 o'clock. So it's all moldable.
Okay, because I think about like my husband, for example, he was an Army helicopter pilot. And I tell you, the guy just seems like he can handle anything. And whereas something might happen in the world or our family or whatever, and I can feel myself bubbling up, and he's just Mr. Calm as a cucumber. And I just think, darn it, did I miss out on a gene?
Well,
that
that also has a lot to do with being a woman. And I don't look at that as a negative thing. As we age, and especially as you have babies, I always say this and people are like, oh, that's horrible. And I say, wait for it. Let me just tell you why. Every time you have a child, a part of your brain dies. But our bodies are magnificent and our brains are magnificent in that another part of your brain takes over. And when you go through menopause, when you go through puberty, and then when you go through menopause, again, different parts of your brains turn on and off. And part of what we have that turns on when we're in that child rearing time is that worry and fear, because we're the protectors. Like, that's good. We're meant to keep humans alive. Right. And then when you go through menopause, part of your brain dies as well. But it's your most empathetic time in your life is menopause and right after, because we're meant to be taking care of elderly if we were all living in communities again.
Okay.
So yes, I would say capacity for stress is a little bit more increased as a woman. And as we go through menopause, especially, our metabolizing stress is a little bit harder for us. But there's other parts of our brain that turn on that kind of make up for that.
Okay. So there's two big times for stress for women. Are there seasons of stress like that, physical seasons for men?
Honestly, not as much.
Yeah.
And now most of my research has been with women, but in terms of men, just like they can do a keto diet or they can fast and they can have the most amazing results right away, they don't have to be as careful. Now, men do go through their own type of menopause. It's just not the same as women. And what I always say to women is, especially as you are going perimenopause, menopause, and right beyond, your ability to handle stress does decrease. So you just have to make sure that you have the right tools, and you reorganize your life in order to have less of that stress. It's a choice. It's a mindset change. I could give, in my forthcoming book, I've got 20 different ways to take your life from stress to rest. But none of that's going to work unless you have that mindset change that I am willing to do the work to decrease the stress.
How does do some women feel that they don't deserve the mindset change?
Absolutely. Because we're at our core servants. Most women are.
We are. But there's also servant and people pleasing. There's a big distinction between the two of those.
And there's also, it goes even further. There's codependent with partners and parents.
Right.
And there's also childhood trauma. If you've had, and most of us have had some type, childhood trauma that makes you feel having an uncontrollable event early in life makes you feel like I have to control everything down the road. And
Isn't that the truth?
Also stops you from releasing stress because you're constantly trying to stay 2 steps ahead.
Right, because you're running surveillance. And I kind of think about that as, you're the warden, everybody else is in jail, and you're just controlling, you're marching around trying to just control everything all of the time. What is that doing for your health? Not much, because then it impacts your sleep. And it's at night when your body repairs itself. When you wake up in the morning and you haven't slept, you crave on average 250 extra sugary carbs throughout the day. So there goes your metabolism. And then that sugar blows out your immune system. So, help us. So give us, where do you start? Let's just say you're working with a woman. She's raised her kids. She's entering menopause and she's really a servant. And I mean that in the most wonderful way of she's served her family, she's served her kids, she's taking care of aging parents. Where does she start with a mindset change to take better care of herself?
And I will add, because this is the woman that I work with almost every single day, is she hasn't stopped serving.
Yeah.
She's still serving her kids. Your kids may be 45, 50, 60 years old. It doesn't stop. And she's still serving her partner, and she's still taking care of other family members. So she has to be able to give herself permission to lay down some of that and put her mask on first. I know it's kind of cliche and we hear it a lot, but you put your mask on first before you put on somebody else's.
Right.
That's something that you have to remind yourself of constantly. I also remind her to give herself grace. We are loved just for who we are, not by our works.
That's the truth. Yeah.
It is very hard to remember, whether as a Christian, which I am, or as not, just to be able to love yourself for who you are. So I always start with the 3 main ingredients to your wellness, which is how you eat, how you move, and how you sleep. And usually not usually, always, I will start first with how you sleep. Because the number one way that you can fix the stress in your life or manage it is to fix your sleep first. Because as you said, sleep is where your brain heals and your body heals. But we're not getting enough deep and REM sleep, which is where those two things happen, if you aren't first getting good sleep. And menopause does make it harder.
So much harder. I'm here
so
to
much
tell
harder.
you.
So we will first focus on sleep. And it's amazing that there are so many things that can be done that are quite simple to help you with your sleep. Now, especially when you're going through menopause, it's probably not going to be perfect. But nobody ever won for I'm the perfect human. I won at age 60. I made it. That doesn't happen. It's always a practice. You're always practicing.
Okay, so sleep. You said you had some kind of easy tips for people because sleep is it's the elephant in the room. With the time change and with, 24-hour news cycles. I mean, you used to be on the news, what that's like. And there's just so many lights and there's distractions. How do we become a better sleeper? What are your top tips?
So it is estimated that on average, U.S. adults are spending 3 hours and 30 minutes before bedtime scrolling social media and the like.
Wait, could you repeat that?
It's estimated that on average, U.S. adults are spending 3 hours and 30 minutes before bedtime scrolling social media and the like.
Oh, so that doesn't include watching TV. That's just
That's
Does
part
it?
of it.
So is it a kind of all
But this is the
screens?
before
Oh,
bedtime is what always gets me. I was like, 3 hours
wow.
and 30 minutes sounds like a lot for the day. This is
Yeah.
just before
This
bedtime.
is before bed.
And so these
Okay.
devices, the screens, the televisions, the computers, all of those things
Hmm.
are rewiring our brains,
They
literally
are.
rewiring our brains. And the forced light that we have throughout our house and working past sundown is
Mhm.
making it impossible for us to turn off our brains. So just by fixing your pre-bed ritual, you can start to mitigate some of the problems that you're having with sleep.
Hmm.
And what I tell people to do is something called 3-2-1. 3 hours before bedtime, you stop eating. We want our body focusing on repairing the brain and the body, not on metabolizing food.
Yeah.
So, plus the same meal that you have first thing in the morning, if you had that same meal at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, your glucose control and the way that you metabolize it does not work as well in the evening as it does in the morning. It's a more harmful meal, no matter what it is,
Hmm.
in the evening as opposed to in the morning. And glucose control is super, super important for almost every single major disease out there.
Yes.
So 3 hours before bedtime, you start eating. 2 hours before bedtime, you stop drinking. Now, a sip of water with some supplements before bed or medication, that's fine. But we're talking about like truly tea, water,
Hmm.
alcohol is a whole other conversation. And
It
then
sure
1 hour,
is.
we could go down that road if you want.
That's our
One,
next podcast.
1 hour before bedtime, you shut everything off. So that means no television. That means no phone. I go so far as on Amazon, you can buy really, really inexpensive red light bulbs. Put those in whatever rooms that you're going to be in for the next hour or so before you go to bed. By
Hmm.
my bedside, there's one. In the bathroom, there's one. Reading is a wonderful thing to do before bed, but do it on like a Paperwhite, Amazon Paperwhite, or an actual book or something that
Hmm.
doesn't have that blue light in it.
Right.
Turn any device that you might have to look at, although I always encourage people that they don't have to look at anything,
Hmm.
turn it into grayscale, which you can do on every single phone and tablet. You can put it on grayscale. And actually, that's like kind of a side thing. If you want to start to mitigate your stress during the day, pick a couple days a week that you
Hmm.
can put your phone on grayscale, and you'll feel the rewiring start to it's amazing because
Really?
the phones, the way they've created them, the lights, the colors, your
Hmm.
brain is hungry for it and it gets hits a dopamine every time it looks. That goes away when you don't have the color. So if you put it in grayscale, you'll notice that you're just not longing to pick up the phone as often.
Okay. Now you're just you're blowing my mind wide open right now. So when it's in grayscale, everything. So if you're looking at
Everything.
pictures, everything is in grayscale. So it's just less attractive, I guess.
Way less, to the point where like I find it almost soothing. After the first day, I was like, wow, this is really weird how
Mhm.
much less overwhelmed and stimulated I feel. And every time I
Kirsten, I'm doing this today.
do it
I'm
today,
I'm really geeking out right now.
yeah. Now you can take pictures, and so anything that you like send or take, it still comes up in color. It's just what you see.
Okay.
But I give it to my teenagers. Like if I'm in one of those days where I'm in grayscale and they pick up my phone, they get actually angry. They're like, this is horrible. This just makes me angry. And I know that's their brains have been
Oh
so
my
wired for that
gosh.
dopamine hit that they're not getting it.
You're the fun mom. I like this.
Yeah, real fun.
It's okay. It's good for them. Hey everyone, I have big news. I now have an Amazon store, which I'm pretty excited about. Love it or hate it, most of us buy things on Amazon probably every month. So, what I've done is I've compiled my favorite healthy, low tox or no tox items that I use in my home every day, or things that I cook for my family, or even things that I used during cancer that just made my life a little bit easier and just would make me feel better. So I've got everything on there from my favorite pour over coffee maker to non toxic cookware to my favorite matcha and also my favorite low acid coffee because I used to have GERD in 2019 and I was so sick and I had to really cut back on acid. And one of my favorite low acid coffees is actually being sold on Amazon now. So there is a link in the show notes. I'm really excited about this store. I'm really excited about this project. And I've also really tried to stay focused on small businesses. So I'm trying not to use big brands, but really focused on small businesses. So I hope you find some things on there that you like. If you have any questions, reach out to me. Or if you find some items you think that should be on there, let me know. I love trying new things and I love buying new things. So I hope you enjoy it. Okay, I've never heard about this before. I mean, at night, yes, but I never considered trying this during the day.
Yep, it's great.
Okay,
Do that.
so it'll dial down your addiction. I mean, it's
At
let's just say it. I mean,
100%.
these
Yep,
are like this is a massive hit of dopamine every time you pick up your
it
phone.
is.
It's like
Yeah,
gambling. I heard I interviewed Dr. Andrew Weil years ago,
I
and
love
he was
him.
talking about. I know he's so great, and he said basically your phone. It's like you're at a casino and you're at a slot machine, you pull the lever and money comes out and you're excited, or the anticipation of money might coming out makes you excited. So whatever it is, it
Hmm.
makes you excited. That's what the phone does. And
It is.
boy, we're addicted. I'll say it for myself. Maybe you're not, maybe other
Oh,
people
I
you
think
know
we
are.
all are.
But I think
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say we all are. And phones are not healthy. We know that it's a constant source of EMFs, but you're right to what it's doing to the brain is making huge changes. I hope they're not permanent to the brain, but it sounds like what you're saying is maybe you can modify it and fix it.
I find it so fascinating that you start to feel it, which gives me hope that we can modify it and fix it.
Hmm. So give me a couple of ways you feel differently after going grayscale for a while.
I feel less overwhelmed, less
Mm.
anxious and eager. And even though I don't necessarily feel like that anxious, eager is a negative thing, because usually I'm excited about doing whatever work I have to do or things. I'm it's fulfilling,
Hmm.
but it's definitely a more calming feeling, and that's where we
Well,
want to be. That's
that's
the getting us from stress to rest part.
right, right. Sympathetic versus parasympathetic mode.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to recap, 3, 2, 1,
Hmm.
3 hours before bed, cut back on food, which I'd say for the most part, I'm pretty good about that. I had GERD years ago in 2018, 2019, gastroesophageal reflux disease. And what I realized is my old habit was to eat almost up until when I went to bed. And then you lay down, and where's that food going to go? It's going to go north into my esophagus. So I learned a long time ago that I've got to really cut back on food at night. So my biggest meal is actually lunchtime.
Absolutely
And I'll
great.
usually do like a 1 or 2 o'clock lunch. And then for dinner, we'll have a bowl of soup and some toast or something. So keep it simple. So 3 hours with the food, 2 hours cutting back on drinks. That's water. Again, it's not an alcohol thing because that is a whole different conversation. And alcohol at night is it's a guaranteed sleep wrecker.
It
It
is.
just is. So, but I don't want to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. So
Right.
cutting back on the fluid has got to be helpful for that.
Exactly.
And then the 1 hour with no screens before bed.
Mhm.
Okay.
And you have to give yourself grace in all of this, because 3, 2, 1 sounds simple, but then I hear automatically people are like, oh, but everybody eats at different times in my family, and or everybody gets home at different times. We want to sit down together and have a meal. And I say, sit down and have a meal. But you could have finished eating at 5 and you're sitting down with your family at 6 with a cup of tea. That's perfectly fine. You have
Yeah.
to reframe how you look at food and meals when you do
Hmm.
this. And same thing with, oh, but the kids go to bed and that's when my husband and I get a chance to sit together and watch a show. Have time with your spouse, but it doesn't have to be in front of a television. Go for a walk,
Yeah.
read a book, play a game, talk.
Right.
And then there's oh, but the news isn't on until 10, 11 o'clock. And then I ask you why you think you're stressed out.
Don't watch the news at 10 or 11 o'clock. Oh
I
my
mean, you
gosh.
answered your own question right there.
Right.
And
Right.
it's all about balance. That's why I said it's a
Hmm.
mindset change. A lot of people are all or nothing, and you cannot be that
Hmm.
way and stay healthy. It's about balance. Maybe 3 nights a week, 3, 2, 1 works. And maybe 2 nights a week, it doesn't. More often than not, get yourself to that. And once I can get people to kind of master 3-2-1 and have that most nights, then I dive deep into things like the supplements that I love. Blue light blocking glasses, my favorite, or True Dark, are amazing. Always make sure that you have eye shade, something over your eyes. Super, super important. We talk about the coolness or the warmth of your bedroom. My favorite for sleep actually starts first thing in the morning, and it goes back to the phone. It's called sun before screens. So the first thing that you do when you wake up is not look at your phone. The first thing you do when you wake up is get outside and get first light, because that's that red and yellow, which is keeping you in check with your circadian rhythm. It's also kickstarting your melatonin production. The first time that you go outside or you sit by a window and you look at that red light, it kickstarts your melatonin production so that 12 hours later you start to become tired and you want to go to sleep at the right time. So sun before screens is very important.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I hadn't heard it said like that, sun before screens, because I admit it. I'll get up. I mean, I won't get onto my phone and work, but I still use it as an alarm clock. And so right away, I'm looking at my phone. It's just, again, for a couple of seconds, but I'm sure that's still creating things that I don't need to be creating in my brain at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely. But the good news is you can mitigate that. If you do need to use your phone or your tablet as your alarm clock, put it on grayscale before you go to bed, so that if you do have to glance at it to turn off an alarm, you're not getting the negative light. And then walk outside, go to your window. I literally slink out of bed every single morning onto my knees, and I say the same prayer 30 seconds before I go to the bathroom and brush my teeth. But make sure it's that in the morning, as opposed to, I'll admit there's people in my family still who the very first thing they do when they wake up is look at their phone and then start going emails.
Right. You're spiraling by
and
7 a.m. Yeah.
That's an instant cortisol. Lifter. And cortisol is what to get rid of your stress. Cortisol is what we're trying to tamper. Now, first thing in the morning, cortisol is great for women. That helps us get up and go. But we're doing a lot of things in the morning, like working out fasted, having caffeine without any food, looking at our screens, that are keeping our cortisol levels high, as opposed to letting them naturally dip and then come back up later.
Because cortisol sounds great, kind of keeps you alert and awake and checking things off your list. What happens to the body if you just kind of keep the cortisol train going?
Yeah, so it's great to lift a vehicle off of a child or to run from a puma. Like, we need cortisol for those things. But if your body is constantly under that cortisol bath, then you are constantly in sympathetic, which is your fight or flight, and you're not moving to parasympathetic, which is your rest and recovery, which is where we need to go. HRV, which you can find on your trackers, your watches, or your rings, or however you might track, which I when I first start seeing somebody in my practice, I always say, let's get you a good tracker so we can just see the numbers, see what's going on inside your body. And HRV measures the beats between your heart rate, that shows you how well your body is going from rest, or from fight or flight to rest and recovery. And going back to that sleep story, the further away that you eat from bedtime, the higher your HRV is going to be, which is what you want. Okay. And you can play with it and you can watch it. So if you have constant cortisol rushing through your body, your HRV is going to be lower and lower. And this is how we can measure overall. Yes, it leads to a whole bunch of different problems with your cardiovascular system, your adrenal system, your nervous system, your immune system. It leads to increased type 2 diabetes, and increased cortisol can be held partially responsible for the increase in obesity in our country. But overall, it is how we look at longevity, not just I live to 100, but I live to 100 well, if our HRV is in that right spot. So that's what we're looking for. And that's part of the reason why we want to get rid of that cortisol and not have it on all the time.
Right. And I would imagine other things during your day just can jack up your cortisol. Somebody cutting you off in traffic and having an over response to a situation or an email. I mean, it sounds like we kind of need to run constant vigilance.
You do. That's why I say a mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that I give people for those things, frequently it's the email. It's the email or the text message, which is why I encourage people on the days when they can to do like a 9 o'clock, a noon, and a 5 o'clock email check, not just be constantly checking it throughout the day, because those emails coming in will go like this all the time.
Yep.
And it's also why one of the things that I dive deep into when I'm keynote speaking and with clients is a true Sabbath day, not in the Jewish practice necessarily, but a complete day of rest where you put the phone away. There is no emails. There is none of that. The only thing, and there's no shopping. There's no online shopping. There's no going to the grocery store. The only thing you're consuming is good food and each other, because that allows you to really get into parasympathetic and gives your cortisol a break. But instantaneous, I want to bring down that fight or flight because I just got a bad email. Box breathing does it, which is the inhale, hold, exhale, hold, inhale, hold, exhale, hold. But my favorite one is face in ice water. So you get like a salad bowl, you fill it with ice and water, you put your face in it for 15 to 30 seconds. And what that's doing is that's turning on your mammalian dive response. It instantly brings down your heart rate. It's not okay if you're somebody who has heart problems, so please understand that.
Right.
But for most of us, it's perfectly fine. And it can almost instantaneously cut off that fight or flight and help you come back down. Now, if you have a whole makeup thing going on, I understand.
Right. So do the box breathing because that works as well, I'm assuming, but maybe not as fast as as the cold plunge of your face. That is fascinating. Okay. Yeah. So there's tools.
There's tools.
Wow.
You have to be willing to do the work,
but
though.
You have to be willing to do the work. And that is what I've seen in my practice as well. Not with my male clients, but with my female clients, is for whatever reason, we do feel like home and hearth really depends on us. And that's a tough one.
We even unconsciously or subconsciously hold stress as a badge of honor. I'm stressed out. I am, oh my goodness, the kids, somebody asks you, how are you doing? And if the answer isn't, oh, fine, then the answer is, I'm good, but we're just so busy, the kids are in this and that. And, I'm taking care of my mom. And if I could just get through, fourth quarter at work, and I just feel, we got to, even if it's good, like we got a new puppy, the puppy's great, but oh my goodness, we're crate training. And then we're trying to, get the puppy to sleep. And then we always add on the things that are stressing us out. We never just say, I'm feeling really relaxed.
We don't ever say that. Because maybe if we do, people are going to roll their eyes and say, well, good for
exactly. You, because we hold it as a badge of honor. And so it's a mindset change in our culture that stress is not something to be proud of.
Okay, that is so interesting. Yeah, I've never had anybody say, "Oh yeah, I'm so good. I'm chill. I'm relaxed. Life is good. Kids are." No, we always, I'm fine. Blah. But here's what's going on, or we just do the "I'm fine," which means nothing.
Nothing. Yeah,
it means absolutely nothing. It's not a way to connect with anybody. Do you think that we're just addicted to busy?
Absolutely. I think that we hold stress as a badge of honor, which is being addicted to busy. And I think that we hold lack of sleep as a badge of honor too. That's one that's very similar, is that, I'm just so exhausted. I didn't get any sleep. When you think about it, that venti coffee was not created for a farmer in Greece. It was created for a stressed out mom or somebody working 60 hours a week. And we carry those things around as like, oh, well, it's fine. I'm doing great. I'm just going to power through.
Or I'll sleep when I'm dead. That's another one.
No.
I just think, stop with that, please. That's a terrible thing to say.
It's making you fast forward through a very unsatisfying life and stealing your life, your joy out of your life.
It does. And then I see it being contagious to your family.
Absolutely.
And speaking of family and that kind of contagious factor of stress, how do we know if our kids are handling stress well?
I think it starts with, just like you said, we have to mirror it. We have to make sure. I think as a society, we've done a really, really good job in the last 3 or 4 decades of making sure that we're very honest and careful around body image and not talking about fat or thin, but talking about healthy. I think the next step for our culture is to have those types of parameters around stress and sleep, and not seeing mom and dad work, because you do hear that. You hear people say, my parents were the best, they worked day and night, they had 7 jobs just to support it. Yes, they might have been doing what needed to be done to provide for a family, but that shouldn't be considered, that lack of sleep and that stress, as something that means you're a good parent. And that really goes back to courage and faith. I always tell people, you can't do any of the 20 plus different ways that I have to help you reduce stress if you don't have courage. And you really can't have courage if you don't have faith. And what that means is that person who feels like, well, there's no way I can do any of these things and I can let go of all of this stress because I've got a family to provide for, I've got this, and I've just got to work my butt off and do that. You have to be able to have the courage and the faith to let it go and know that God will make it okay for you. He may not give you it in the manner that you want. He may not provide in the monetary way that you think, but he will give you a peace that surpasses all understanding, no matter what situation he put you in. We learned that when we were missionaries. We had no paycheck. We lived in next to nothing. There was no Amazon. There was no shopping. And my family, my kids, we were the happiest we have ever been. And I would have never thought, because we're in this place in mainline Pennsylvania where it's all about, your pool and how big your house it is and private schools. And, my kids only worry about things like, are they going to get the next iPhone and highlights in their hair? That's not what we're taught in the US. You have to keep performing and producing and rushing and in order to thrive and be happy.
Right.
And you don't.
I think we also, not only are we addicted to busyness, we're addicted to the show. Putting on that happy face while you're literally dying inside, keeping up with the Joneses, we used to say. I mean, just all those things that none of them are real. None of them are eternal. And that becomes contagious to your kids, because if you're going as mom or dad, they're going to mirror. That's
absolutely,
that's the way it works. That's the way it works.
I also think as a parent, you have to make the hard decisions for them. When I talk about having a Sabbath day, and if you look up the verses in the Bible that talk about having a Sabbath day, it says, not only should you be doing nothing, but neither should your children or your servants or all those things. And it's hard for us as parents to say, okay, we're going to have a day where you don't have soccer practice. Maybe we have to have a conversation with your coach and be like, this is a day that she's not going to be at practice, or they're not going to do this, or I'm going to take away their phone and they're going to have one day of being bored, because that is helping their brains heal. And they're going to be mad at first. But as a parent, that's going to help them with their level of stress, because this is the hardest time for teenagers of any era. It's horrible.
It's absolutely horrible. I know. I just can't imagine raising young ones. And for you, teenagers. Right now in the season, but God knew that these were the perfect kids for this time.
Absolutely.
So I just want to encourage you with that.
Well, thank you.
Okay. So I want to ask, what advice would you give to the 20-year-old Kerstin about managing her stress?
I would tell her to give herself grace. I was very eager to make everything happen. And I was just like my mom. She was a self-professed stress case. And that's kind of what I picked up on, was the go, and the worry. And I had to forgive myself for that. So to have courage and to give myself grace.
And so now you can tell your kids that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. With the 2 girls, that's going to be really helpful. How do you, you said something that really jumped out at me. How do you forgive yourself?
That's a good question, right? I think it's harder to forgive yourself than it is. You have to think of it this way, especially if you're a parent. There's nothing your child can do really that is going to separate them from your love. No matter how bad it is, you want them to come to you and tell you, and you want to hold their hand and cry with them through it. Yeah. And I think you have to imagine And this is what I do frequently, especially not having my mom around and having lost her and having, my dad very, very far away and I never see him, is that my Heavenly Father is sitting there with me. And when I'm ashamed or I'm broken or something's happened and I'm trying to forgive myself, imagine myself leaning on him like my children do on me and understanding his forgiveness and his loving me anyway and his grace. And that really helps me visualize forgiving myself.
That's really beautiful. And I would imagine, sometimes that's something you need to do multiple times a day.
Yeah.
Is to just get in that space of just, okay, like I blew it today. I forgive you. And just move on.
Because once again, there's no perfect person. You're not going to get it right. It's always a practice. Every day is a practice. I have a journaling practice that I do with everybody. And you ask yourself 10 questions every single morning. And one of them is, what's going to stress me out today and how am I going to react? And another one, you just write the word humility. And that's kind of a place for you to humble yourself and say, okay, yeah, you're right. I blew it here, but that's okay. It's gone. There's power in taking pen to paper and kind of just getting it out.
So then with this journaling practice, you kind of set yourself up for success because things are going to be coming at you. And so you just kind of, for lack of a better expression, gird your loins first thing in the morning.
100%. If you can get it out first, like there are days when I know I've got a meeting with somebody that is not my favorite person, or somebody's coming over, or especially during the holidays. I mean, a lot of that.
Yeah.
So when you go through what you're grateful for, your prayers, what you're excited about during the day, when you write down what could possibly stress me out, and it can be a couple of different things. And then the next question, how are you going to react to that? And it could be prayer. It could be taking some deep breaths. It could be walking away. It could be putting up boundaries, but prepare yourself for it.
That is really smart because every day there's going to be somebody who's going to push your buttons, but
So true.
kind of just prepare. I mean, I marinate meat I'm going to make for dinner, so I prepare that.
Right.
So why not marinate? Why not prepare for that meeting with my accountant? Where I'm just I hate this, but prepare myself and make sure I'm prayed up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, for the person who's listening right now, where this just seems like too much advice, too many boxes to check to try to lower their stress, what's your favorite tip for them to help get a handle on their stress today?
Have the courage to start making some changes in your life. Work on your courage. And as I said, you're not going to have that courage if you don't have faith. This is where that faith in a higher power, for me, it's the Lord, is what you need to have, because we can say, I'm going to give it to God and it's all in God's hands. And it's a favorite saying. I mean, I have a lifestyle brand of clothes and bags that say, faith over fear on them and grace and gratitude. We can say that, but then behind the scenes, we're still controlling and manipulating and planning our way out of things, as opposed to just completely surrendering it, letting go and letting God have his way. So in order to have that courage, you have to work on your faith. And if you have faith and then have that courage, these changes in your life won't seem so hard and overwhelming.
You surprised me. That was a great tip to end on, because courage doesn't cost you anything out of your wallet. Might cost you a little bit of time, and it's going to deepen your faith. That was a very surprising answer. So thank you. I don't get surprised too often. So
I'm here for it.
That was great. I loved it. Okay. So Kerstin, how can people find you?
I'm most active on Instagram, which is Kerstin.Lindquist, but I'm also Kerstin.Lindquist over all platforms. I have a website that is where you find all my health coaching. I've got a lot of workshops coming up in January. I'm a keynote speaker, and I have a podcast coming up on December 6th. Also, all of my books. That's all on my website, which is Kerstin-Lindquist.com.
Okay. And then I'll add everything into the show notes. And what's so fun about this is this podcast releases December 5th and yours starts December 6th. So there you go.
I love it. And I'm going to Going to have you on so we can continue this
Can't
conversation.
wait. Can't wait. Well,
Absolutely.
thanks for being on Why Did I Get Cancer?
Thank you so much.
I am a big fan of breathing clean air. And that's not so easy, especially when you think about latest research is showing that indoor air is massively more polluted than outdoor air unless you're in the middle of a wildfire. So that's why I actually do use an air filter in my house. I have one in our bedroom, and then we also have one in our living room area, because I want to know that I'm breathing great air in my house. And there are times when you just can't open the door and bring in fresh air. So that's where Air Doctor comes in. I got to tell you, I first heard about Air Doctor on Dr. Mark Hyman's podcast, and I thought, wow, that's probably a little bit more than I wanted to spend. But then when I looked at it and really kind of read some of their studies, I decided, you know what, it was worth it. And I'm really happy that I did. It's got 3 stages of filtration, which I'm really excited about. It's got an ultra HEPA filter, which can actually end up pulling smaller particles out of the air than a lot of other filters that are on the market that are probably a little bit less expensive. So I'm really happy with my Air Doctor. I've had it now for, gosh, probably about a year. And I have to tell you, when I pulled the filters out to replace them, it tells you, which is so nice, it tells you when it's time. They were so dirty and ucky and gucky and all those words. I couldn't believe how much stuff was actually in my house. It kind of, I'll be honest, kind of creeped me out a little bit, but it also made me really happy that stuff didn't go into our lungs. And also, Air Doctor's got a great Black Friday deal going right now. It seems like everybody does, but theirs is really, really good. So it's literally hundreds of dollars off on an air filter, the filters that actually go into the air purifier, and free shipping, which is a screaming deal. So it's Black Friday, so it's not going to last for very long. All of the information and the link all in the show notes. Enjoy. Hey, y'all, can you do me a favor today and go and leave a review of this podcast? I know that the more great reviews, wink, wink, emphasis on great, reviews that I get, along with more downloads and more subscribers, that pushes this podcast out to people who might normally not even find it. And the reason I started this podcast and my real heart for starting this podcast is that I needed this information. It wasn't available. And so I started a podcast so that I could be a blessing to others. So you're a blessing to me just by being here. And again, thank you for your support. Thank you for your positive reviews and all of the notes that you send me. And also just want to say, hey, keep in mind, I'm not a doctor. And if you need medical advice, please reach out to your team. That is going to be just the best source for you because they know you. So again, I hope you enjoy this podcast.